WNST, Towson, Baltimore. Always the loveliest time of the year, the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's always lovely until the Capitals lose. It is very, very painful when that happens. This guy knows all of the pain and very, very little of the glory of being one of the Caps historians. He is an internet researcher and sports dude at Newsday up in New York, but a long, long time Capitals historian and author of books and stuff. We welcome Ted Starkey back to the program as we gear up for yet another ride up the big red hill here, Ted, to try to, as they once said in Greece, ring the victory bell like we've always wanted to, right?
Exactly. It's the most fun time of year. It could be the most cruel time of year. 16 teams go in and 15 won't be happy.
All right, man. Well, where are you in all of this? I follow you out on Twitter, and I know thousands do, and Chasing the Dream and Red Rising and all of this. For me, the part that I've brought up with all the old line people, and that's all of you, whether it's you, Locker, Koken, Beninati, Eddie, Frankovic, our partner here, anybody that's been around this a long time, they have something really going for them. Their best player is playing like the best player in the world. He's fit, he's healthy, he's motivated, he's leadership-oriented. It feels like the last go at the rodeo for him every time he does this. He's tired of losing. He's tired of taking that back to Russia. Before the implosion of the Republic here, and he goes back to Russia, it probably would be nice for him to win a Stanley Cup. Boy, they got a lot of motivated guys, and they're not the favorite. They're none of that, but they're as good as they've ever been on any given night, and certainly the way they've played the last month, they feel like a factor. It feels like they can do this.
Agreed. I mean, I think the biggest thing, it's actually probably not a bad thing for them this year not to be the favorite, because, the last 2 years, they've gone into the postseason and said, we're going to be the top seed, you got to beat the Penguins, you got to get through the finals, how are they going to do this? And obviously, I think part of the reason they didn't make it out is I don't think they could really deal with the pressure. This time you kind of flip it around. I think no one really expects them to come out of the East. A lot of people are picking Boston or Tampa or Pittsburgh. And that's not a bad position to be in because, they don't have to come home to fans that, this is an absolute disaster if, they don't win as much as they expect them to. But, I think it's not a bad thing. If you look 20 years ago, probably the most surprising team in Caps history was a team that was not expected to do a whole lot either. Peter Bondra had a great season. They went into the playoffs. They ended up playing Boston. It looked like they might lose in the first round to Boston. But then they got some help from around the league. They got a great goaltending from Olaf Kolzig and ended up making the finals. I mean, you look at this year's team, like you said, Ovechkin's playing well. They have two good goaltenders right now to pick from.
That unto itself becomes the biggest question, right? And then that rests on Trotz, that rests on coaching. And look, man, that is 1,000,000% feel, right? Like that is there is no science behind how you go out and lose a game 6 with the season on the line and hope he's not even in the pipes, right? Like to think that they're going to do that or could do that puts a lot more pressure on the coaching, a lot more pressure on everybody, but it also could make it easier if it's one on, one off, but I don't know that either one of those guys would adjust to that.
Yeah, it's a little tricky in the playoffs because obviously you want to ride the hot hand. But the one option it gives them is, if Grubauer wouldn't have been around this year, let's say he was claimed by the expansion draft last summer, if you have Phoenix Copley as your backup, you're stuck with Holtby. If Holtby's tired, if he gets hurt, you're riding on a guy who has a lot of NHL experience. This way, if Holtby has a bad game or Grubauer has a bad game, you can go back and forth. I mean, it's not unheard of, but it's probably not a bad problem for them to have because, if one of the goaltenders, doesn't perform well, it starts to cool off, or even gets hurt, you have a good insurance policy. You look at a team like Pittsburgh. If Matt Murray gets hurt, they're in a world of trouble because, they don't have a Grubauer off the bench who could actually play, and take that team deep. So, I think that's one of the things Washington has going for it is they have two really good goaltenders who both could be number one goalies. And both could probably win them a playoff series.
Ted, tell everybody your background with the Capitals and, why a guy with a 716 phone out of Buffalo meets Rochester and doing things at Newsday would be so involved with the Capitals and so vested as you've been for so long.
Oh, I've been, I grew up in Northern Virginia area. My dad was a Caps ticket holder from 1980. Basically interned with the team at a communications experiment out of college. and then started to work for USA Hockey. I worked for the Washington Times. I worked for AOL, and lately I've been doing stuff with the Sporting News. Basically covering this team. I mean, they were the team. There was when I started watching them, there was 21 teams in the league. There wasn't a whole lot of interest in hockey in Washington. It was more of a niche sport. It's amazing to see what's going on now because it was kind of like a cult following. But it's been a very tumultuous ride. I mean, I was talking to somebody about the 1980s Caps, and it was always that team was stacked when you look at it in retrospect.
Those were great teams, man. Those were great. I mean, Eddie and I met back in '85, but those teams with Gardner and then Cicerelli and everything that came in between with Langway and Stevens and Christian and Locker was a part of those teams and Alan Howarth in the early days, and they never had the goaltending right? And if you don't have the goaltending right, you're not going to win the Stanley Cup. The question is, do the Capitals have that part of it? They have two guys that I think either one of them could win the Stanley Cup, but my money's still on Holtby, and I know he struggled in a unique way this year, and Grubauer's been uniquely qualified and shown himself to be that. But I think in the end, Holtby would be the guy I would go with based on history, and I wouldn't want to lose with him on the bench.
Agree. I think, he's obviously got a playoff pedigree. He wasn't great last year, but, again, like we were saying, if he's not great, you got a good insurance policy on the bench. But, I think out of the gate, you go with Holtby to see how he does, because, he's still a big game goalie. You remember 2012, he knocked off what was the number 2 seed in defending Stanley Cup champs in the Bruins and almost took them, it was not a great Caps team, almost got them in the third round. This year they'll be playing Columbus, and, he's definitely performed well against the Blue Jackets. I believe he's played all 4 games against them this year, and, he's performed pretty well. So I think what you have to do is you kind of go with Holtby as your 1 and Grubauer as your 1A. If Holtby doesn't perform as you want, you can go to Grubauer. If not, you definitely got an accomplished veteran to lead you deep in the playoffs.
He is Ted Starkey. You can follow him at Ted Starkey out on Twitter, Internet News Manager for Newsday, also the author of Red Rising and the Washington Capitals story. And this is, I guess, where it all gets conflicted. We had Coach Trotz at the Michael's Cafe a couple of weeks ago. If you missed that, you could find it out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault, as well as on our YouTube and our Facebook Live TV and video channels. And, the contract's up on him, much like Buck Showalter in Baltimore this year. And Ozzie Newsom's doing his last year here. I don't know what the future is, and obviously Ovechkin and all that he's accomplished here. Boy, to think that Trotz has come under fire from a bunch of internet yahoos, in the recent weeks with all the winning they've done. And, first off, if they fire him or he walks away or they walk away, he'll be out of work about a minute and a half, as you know. It probably would be the last job he would take, whatever the next job is, whether it's the Capitals or moving on. But, it seems to me that things have been a whole lot less chaotic around here with Barry Trotz and a whole lot more focused in every way with Barry Trotz around. But so much of this is, look, the season could be over in 8 days and they can lose in 5 games because that happens in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And certainly that would be unfortunate. It would be the crash at the side of the road and all of that. I feel like that the band's going to be playing after midnight and the room's going to get smoky this time around. I feel like they're going to play, and they're going to play well here the next couple of weeks. And I don't think that they've ever really stunk it up in the Stanley Cup playoffs. They're the team that loses Game 7, not the team that gets swept in 4 games. It's a lot more painful because they're never not representative in April. They really are unlucky a lot of the time. And through it all, maybe this is a year they have some luck because certainly they're playing well. Their best players playing well. They have 2 goalies. They have a lot of want to. They have a lot of guys that have come close and have been disappointed and have lost these Game 7s, and the Carlsons and the Kuznetsovs and the Backstroms and the Beagles. There's plenty of motivation here, and I'm quietly optimistic, Ted. That's all I've said about it. I mean, I don't think they're going to win the Stanley Cup. I know what it takes, but I've cleared my calendar because I need to, and they might.
Exactly. I mean, the thing with this year's team, even though they were a better team last year, obviously the big roadblock for them is in Pittsburgh the last couple of years. Well, the thing is, the Penguins aren't that as good either. I mean, it's actually, they might have a better chance of beating the Penguins this year than they did last year. And then if they beat the Penguins, then they're kind of playing with house money because then they kind of get the monkey off their back about the second round, and everyone's kind of, playing with a lot more confidence. But as I said, they're well constructed. I mean, they lost some guys in the off season, but they really didn't lose any of their core players, which is, some other teams did. The playoffs are just, it's a matter of matchups, and it's a matter of who gets hot when, and you get a bit of luck. It's one of the most toughest tournaments to predict because you just don't know. If a goaltender gets hot, guy goes cold, see, a whole postseason can change. I mean, it could just be, you can have an A seed win the division or coming out of the playoffs, and who knows? It's just one of those things that, this year's team, they have pretty much the ingredients if they can. If everyone plays well, they get some breaks, they could go really deep. And I think, kind of playing under the radar is to their strength because I think when people expected the Capitals to do a lot of stuff, they kind of wilted under the pressure. This time around, they won't have the pressure on them. If they play the Penguins, they'll be heavy underdogs, even, if the Caps win in 4 and the Penguins win in 7. So, it's going to be curious. But, with a guy like Barry Trotz, I think, he may, like you said, this may be his last rodeo in Washington, and he obviously has done a good job here. I think anyone who complains about the performance in the last couple of years has got to realize this is the only team in the NHL that's reached the second round 3 years in a row. This is the only team that's had division back-to-back. No one else has had that. Teams go, they rise and they fall. The Caps have been a really consistent, good team, and if they get a little bit of breaks, they could go really far.
Ted Starkey joining us here. It's all brought to you by our friends at Howard Bank, a relentless commitment to being the best at everything they do. Branches throughout Baltimore and Maryland. Every person at Howard Bank empowered to help you. See them at howardbank.com. They're also sponsoring our community and charity series along with my pal Bill Cole and Cole Roofing. We all felt that March wind blowing through. Don't let it goof on your roof. You got a corporate roofing space. Have it maintained, have it checked out now, have it inspected to make sure things are okie dokie. That's what Cole Roofing does. They'd rather inspect it now than have to come there and have a mess this time next year. Cole Roofing and Pfister Energy are friends. Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. The tasty coffee, the best fried chicken in the land. And, of course, Justin Tucker telling you, same as me. Get that app, download the app, make sure you're using that. You'll save money on the Western fries, that delicious fried chicken, and that Rofo coffee that gets you going in the morning with that Kona blend. The Brigade begin their brigade in the AFL second season over at the Rofo Arena on Friday night against the Washington Valor. I am wearing my Brigade hat. You can learn more at BaltimoreBrigade.com as well as at Monumental Sports. Little reminder as well for anybody out there with kids, on Sunday, the Wild Kratz Show, the Sunday 4:30 show at the Modell Lyric. Still got some tickets available for that. If your kids love PBS and learning, they're going to love the Wild Kratz Show. It's 4:30 Sunday. Modell Lyric, now our partner here at WNST. Britt Floyd is on the 26th, a little Pink Floyd music, as well as Jackson Brown on May 3rd. Kansas and Steely Dan coming to town in the fall. We'll be talking to them and more about them. Right now, we're rocking the red, talking Stanley Cup hockey and Red Rising with the author of Red Rising, Ted Starkey, who's a longtime Cap sufferer along with all of the rest of us. Columbus, first round. They've never taken a facer to Columbus. I don't know why that would start now. I feel pretty confident they're going to win this week.
Yeah, I think the biggest question for Columbus is going to be, they've made the playoffs 3 times. Last 2 times they've lost to the Penguins. And, the one problem they had was Sergei Bobrovsky was not the Vezina type of goalie that he could be in the regular season. Then again, this is the Washington Capitals, so you know that sometimes even mediocre goaltenders can get really hot in April. So I think the biggest key for the Capitals is kind of have to really take advantage of their chances against Bobrovsky, because if he gets in their heads a little bit, the Caps tend to overpass. They'll really tie up the lanes, and they'll really try to make sure the Caps don't get a whole lot of shots on him that they can score on. The other factor is going to be John Tortorella, who obviously Caps fans will know from Tampa Bay days, Ranger days, and his whole strategy was to try to kind of slow down the game and win 1-goal efforts. They're going to try to frustrate the Caps. It will probably not be an entertaining series, because they're going to try to slow the game down. But the Caps, basically, against a team like Columbus, you just have to take advantage of their chances. Because, you're not going to get 35 good shots a night. You're going to have to take advantage of the 20 odd chances you're going to get, and then bury a couple of them, because otherwise, if Ralston gets hot, that really could make a long series for Washington.
Ted, the Blackhawks fans won. The Cubs fans won. The Red Sox fans have won several times. Cleveland now has a championship. Even the Philadelphia Eagles won a championship. I mean, is it going to happen in our lifetime? I turned 50 this year. I don't know how old you are, quite frankly, but I turned 50, and, I've been at this thing on a quest level since 84, on an interest level since 81. Back in the 70s, the Caps couldn't even make the playoffs, during that era where the Canadians and the Islanders began. But, all during the Oilers era and everything that happened after that, they've always been sort of in it, and I've never felt them to be woeful or inept or incapable. And, leaving the Garden a couple of years ago was the worst because they had Game 6 won, and then they lost Game 7. It was one of the more exciting sporting events I've ever attended. Going back, and I was at the Islanders-Caps game back in '87 with LaFontaine, so it's got a lot of blood on the bricks, dude. And, it would mean so much more to me if they were to win with Barry Trotz than to win in any other capacity. So I really do feel that this could be the end of the rodeo, because they're either going to win or probably he won't be back, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what anybody's thinking in that circumstance. Marvin Lewis has 3 times thought he was leaving Cincinnati. He's still there. So, not for me to say, but, it does start to feel like the road, if not now, then when? You've had Ovechkin in his prime. You've had Backstrom in his prime. You've had the right coach. You've had the goaltending. You've had all sorts of things. I don't know how I would react if they're playing in the Stanley Cup Finals 8 weeks from now, man. I don't know how I would handle it.
It's funny because I've always thought the year they might actually win would be a year that no one actually expects it. Like I alluded to earlier about '98.
Well, this might be it. I mean, literally nobody expects it this year, right?
No, exactly. I mean, there are people that are predicting they'd be out of the playoffs, which I thought that was a bit extreme, because I thought, you're going, even if you lose 15 points off a 118-point team, you're still going to be in the playoffs.
By the way, Eddie Frankovic had him at $1.05, and they finished at $1.05.
Exactly.
I can only hope that my Oriole 85 win thing holds up, Ted,
And the funny part is, I think part of it, they probably would have had more points had they actually put more effort in the regular season. I think, there's an element of, hey, the regular season doesn't matter as much, so there were some nights where the effort wasn't there. But, in terms of what this franchise could do, hockey is just such a weird game. I mean, you had so many of these teams, even before a dynasty, before a Stanley Cup. The year before the Bruins won the Stanley Cup a couple of years ago, they won the President's Trophy. They went out in the second round. I mean, you see these teams, you don't always see it when you expect. It's just a matter of you're going to get some luck on your side if you're going to win a Stanley Cup. You get a bit of the matchups if you're going to win a Stanley Cup, and you just got to get, some. You remember John Druce in 1990.
Absolutely.
No one would have predicted the guy would just go bonkers and get the Caps into the Wales Conference Finals.
Ted, I would say this. They have played well enough recently to win a Stanley Cup. I mean, in the last couple of weeks, they've looked like a team that's capable. That's all
right.
and that's all I have to go on. And obviously, the last few years, they've looked like a powerhouse. They haven't looked like that, but just the want that I saw and the fun that they're having out there against the Devils and trying to get Ovechkin the 50th goal and beating a team when they didn't need to and trying hard when they didn't need to. The last week and a half of the trip to Montreal and New York, after the mess in Philadelphia, they've just responded well. I just think they're going to be a hard out. It's going to be hard to beat them 4 times in 7 nights, I think.
Agreed. I mean, it's not, like you said, it's not going to be they're going to blow teams down anymore, but they've been a really, really good team the last couple of weeks. And, I think they know that the playoffs are here. This is what they're all going to be judged by. And, I think they have the talent if they can, get everything together at the right time, get a couple breaks. The team definitely could win because, as we said earlier with the Penguins, that's probably their biggest series, because they played pretty well against Boston. They haven't lost to Boston in a long time. Tampa's the other big team in the East, and they haven't really played as well, going down the second half of the season, so they're both beatable. Then you go, the West could be a mess, and, who knows? if they could do well against Columbus, if they can finally get rid of Pittsburgh in a 7-game series, this team has definitely potential to win the Cup this year.
Ted, a pleasure to always see you. I hope I run into you at Game 2. I have an obligation with Casey Cares the night of Game 1, so I'll be watching from afar. We're going to be doing some viewing parties for the Caps next week for Games 3 and 4 when they're out in Columbus. We're going to be here locally supporting the Caps, rocking the red. I have decided to stay off the road. I had a good time last year running around Toronto and Pittsburgh. I'm laying low here first round. I'm going to the home games. If they get through, it's Philadelphia or Pittsburgh. I probably will be at the lion's share of them. Obviously, all the Philadelphia games I'd be at. But Pittsburgh, I'd have to think about running out there for a 3-4. And certainly I'd be there for a Game 6 in Pittsburgh. And then after that, it could be anything. And, whether it's Tampa, Boston, Toronto, wherever the road would go, I hope that you and I are still chatting once every week or so, in the middle of May as we get up on Preakness and the Capitals are still involved in this thing. It really would be quite a treat for the spring. And it would kind of come from out of nowhere in some sort of weird way after we've all been waiting 40 years, right?
Exactly. And, if you want to look at a positive note, every, the last couple of decades with the year of the 8, you had, Dale Hunter against the Flyers in 1988. You had Stanley Cup run in 1998. And then, of course, the amazing run to just get in the playoffs in 2008. So, maybe it'll be a lucky 8 again for them again this year.
We'll send everybody out and rock the red. If you want to read some great historical work, Red Rising in the Washington Capitol story is there for you, as well as Chasing the Dream, Life in the American Hockey League. Ted Starkey, Internet News Manager for Newsday. You can follow him out at Ted Starkey. That's Starkey. Out on Twitter and at Newsday.com. All of our WNST coverage brought to you by our friends at Michael's Cafe in Timonium, where they have the crab cakes and the split-level soup. It's tasty and delicious. We're going to get out there and watch a Caps game before it's all over with. I'm setting up the night, working on it for sometime next week. So join us at where Perry Trotz joined us a couple weeks ago at Michael's Cafe. Maybe we'll do an Oriole game as well as a Caps game. Some intertwining going on there. King Discount Liquors, lottery, beer, booze, and the best prices in Baltimore, as well as great television commercials. Even though I'm not in the recent ones, they're always fun when I'm in them. They're even more fun when I'm not in them. I'm watching Johnny Bev and Paul King in the middle of my Orioles games laughing. King Discount Liquors, Pulaski Highway out in Rosedale. Go give the King a ring. Pick me up a bottle of Malbec while you do that as well. G&A Coney Island hot dogs in Highlandtown are the best in the world. Go see my man Andy up there. Get 2, 3, 4 hot dogs. Get the chili on there too. Pretend you don't have any friends or neighbors. It's okay to have a little chili on your hot dog at G&A Coney Island Hot Dog. We'll be back in Highlandtown doing that, just like I did when I was a boy, catching the 22 at the 33rd Street. I am Nestor. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook, as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We never stop rocking the red, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.